Okay, thank you very much. There were two other questions, at least, or three even, that were raised by the speaker there, were mostly about what the reserves were to look after the pumps, I think, wasn't it? In terms of the 1987 pumps, have they been properly maintained, and what spares are held to sustain them? Is that right? That's so can anyone answer that question? Can anyone answer that question? Would you like to?
The question about contingency plans.
Can you say who you are, please?
So I'm Peter Holmes, I'm up for the Environment Agency. The contingency plans for the Foss barrier failing is to issue the severe flood warning. Because as Mark had explained, the capacity of the pumping station is so great, we can't get temporary pumps in there quick enough to actually assist them. As Mark has already said, these temporary pumps, these 24-inch pumps that you might have seen down in Somerset on the television, they can each pump 1 cubic metres per second. It's 1,000 litres per second. We would need at least 30 of those to actually match what goes on in the barrier. They are huge. So the contingency plan for the Foss barrier is to issue the severe flood warning if it fails, which was done. The pumps that are in place at the Foss barrier are the ones that were put in 1987. They have been refurbished a number of times since then, and so they have, since the floods, worked very well. In terms of the spares, we do carry spares on site, but obviously we don't carry spare pumps because to actually get pumps in and out, you need a big crane, and obviously during the flood, you can't get the crane anywhere near that. I'm sorry, I forgot what the fourth question was. Could you repeat the fourth question?
The supplies for the pumping station.
The supplies that were lifted in.
Oh, the supplies, okay. Once the pumping station had failed and the electrics got swamped, we couldn't then use the control system in the pumps, in the station, to operate the pumps. So the only way we could do that is by getting what's called the direct start and generators in there to actually do that. And that's what you saw the Chinook helicopter bringing in, was the direct starts for the pumps. So each one of the pumps had one of these direct starts to be able to operate it. And we used the generator actually on site and brought in additional generation to actually run all those pumps. So that's when we got all 8 pumps running by the 29th, 30th?
53 hours from the time we lifted the barrier.
So it took us about 2.5 days to get all that organised, because you can recognise with these having to get the equipment in from the military took some time to organise. So that's hopefully I've answered your question there.
Okay, thank you very much. Sorry, can't hear two people at once. The gentleman here, would you like to take the microphone so we can hear you?
Right.
Okay, well, I'll be over it.
Well, the pumping station now is working. Yes, right. Right. It was working before because, and before the inundation, because what happened was the water came up inside the pumping station and drowned out all the control panels, so we couldn't use them. That's why we need the direct starts on top of the pumping station. They're still in place, and they'll stay in place until such time as we can get new control systems put in place. So that's the contingency plan. They will remain in place as long as they're required, together with all the additional generation. We are looking to get some permanent new power supplies to that in the very, very near future. But until then, the pumps will still operate using the generators. That's something we can't do very quickly. We can do it over a longer term. Yeah, but we can do that now. That's the next stage.
There's a lady up in the right-hand side here. Yes, I know. I'm asking her first.
At 7 o'clock in the evening, I could see there was a problem, but nobody came, nothing was said. Where I actually live was sealed off, other than going out of the back way, and then you couldn't go anywhere else. But nobody, police, nothing against anybody in particular, but nobody came and said there is a severe problem. They knew the Foss barrier wasn't working by 7 o'clock that evening, but nobody came. And then at 1:10 in the morning, the police and whoever else it was came, would you like evacuating? I live on a top floor flat. Wouldn't it be more sensible to bring sandbags and to inform the people what was on the ground floor earlier on that they could have had help to get out? My friend lives virtually around the corner. They knew nothing until the following day, but they had sandbags. Why wasn't anybody else given the sandbags?
I bought the sandbags.
But nobody brought them on Navigation Road on the
So, I mean,
corner at all.
what you're raising
they
is
knew
a
there
really-
was a problem at 7 o'clock
It's a
at
really
night.
important question. It's very similar to the one that the lady asked. Do you want to answer that about the sandbags?
I can't answer the question about the sandbags, but I can answer the question in relation to the timing of warning and informing, if that's okay, because I think that was the first part of your question.
I just want you to concentrate on Navigation Road now.
Okay, I'm trying to concentrate on
Well, I'll
everybody
come back
that's
to you.
here, if that's okay.
Asking about Navigation Road.
Okay.
Is your question related to Navigation Road?
Okay, so
So you're not listening?
okay, I can. I mean, I can explain from my position because I was actually working over the night shift on Boxing Day night. So I was called in to work on that. In terms of the police silver control, in terms of warning people and informing people, like I said, it was 7:10 when the Silver Commander was informed that the Foss barrier was being raised. Okay, the timeline's been explained. Okay, on any given day, we don't have the resources at the click of a button to go out. Well, what I'm trying to explain to you why there's a gap in the timeline.
Virtually blocked off already at 7:10. So why was nothing done in that scale between 7 and 1?
Okay.
You know, there's 6 hours, but in that time, nothing at all.
Because the time, I'm trying to explain to you what was. We need, as a police, okay, information of, and what I requested was what I called the priority 1 addresses. What are those addresses that are either flooding or at immediate risk of flooding? There's over 600 addresses we were given. I have.
Okay, the gentleman at the back who wants to extend the question on Navigation Road, would he like to ask his question now? Can you give him a microphone, please? And the lady, several ladies, yes, do, carry on. No, Gwen.
Thank you very much indeed. Could I first of all ask that the microphone is actually handed round the room so that we are not left trying to shout over each other whilst the panel is properly mic'd. I would ask that, please, on behalf of the audience. I want to try and redirect this slightly. The Environment Agency very definitely has some real questions to answer on this, but my concern as a volunteer after the flood happened has been about the recovery effort. I think there is a real and there is a palpable anger amongst York's communities about particularly the City of York's Council's recovery effort following the flooding. It happened, we need to recover, we need to clear up. People weren't warned properly. That is also the Council's responsibility. This is really directed towards the Chief Executive. Does he really feel, as Sally Burns, the Director of Neighbourhoods and Communities, said to me the other day, that the City of York Council has done a cracking job? When people weren't warned, volunteers weren't coordinated properly, or their volunteering emails not even replied to, SCIP's provision and waste disposal was not adequately organised, still isn't adequately organised. Businesses and householders in many areas have not been supported. Some of them have not even yet been contacted. Did you do a cracking job, Mr. Stewart?
Well, thank you. As I said earlier, there was a certain amount of improvisation that had to be done here because the reason why there is a gap is because initially we had no concrete information about which properties were going to be flooded because people's expectations were that the barrier would work. Now, in relation to things like skips, you know, we don't have to provide you with skips. Lots of people, lots of councils don't. Yeah, if I could just finish a sentence, it'd be really helpful. Yeah. Yeah.
Emergency helpline on Boxing Night. What would the website direct to? Would you be told that this phone is not manned until Tuesday the 28th? The emergency phone line was not manned on Boxing Night.
Yeah. There were.
So we could get no answers from anyone. What's the point of an emergency line if nobody's answering it?
Yeah. I can't answer your specific question on that, but all right. All right. Okay. Right.
Now, you wanted to conclude your contribution.
No, I wanted to hear what Mr. Stewart had to say and then ask the supplementary if it is appropriate.
Yeah, well, there are two people at the back of the room who've been trying to ask questions for a very long time. The lady in red.
Not driven down using the tannoy to let people know.
There were means to actually get the message out there. I'm concerned at the amount of emergency planning there has been within the council. For example, tabletop exercises, gaming, has that been done? Those are questions for another day. Yeah. You've mentioned skips. I'm just going to come back on that right now. I spoke to Your Waste 3 days ago. I was told that 50 of their skips had been sent to Cumbria. Now, that is quite understandable. Cumbria flooded before we did. However, the situation with skips has been abysmal throughout York during the flooding. I'm sorry, please don't raise your eyebrows at me, I can see it from here. It has been abysmal. We have had skips that have been unemptied for over 4 days. That is a public health risk. There has been a parasitical infection going around some of the pets in York that is transmissible to humans. It is zoonotic. Please, York City Council has to take on board that it did have responsibilities, because we could have ended up, never mind a parasitical infection, in certain areas we could have ended up with far worse than that. In areas of York, we are still clearing out, and it is noticeable that it is only once the media and the press have become involved that the council seems to have upped its response. The lady is quite right. The phone lines have been unmanned. York City Council has had a list of council staff willing to work overtime. They have been told they are not required. They are only being paid a time and a quarter. And many of them have been out volunteering in their own time. They want to help more. The officers on the ground feel very unsupported, extremely low morale. Somebody further up the council must start to get a grip on this situation. It has been a disgrace.
Thank you very much.
I mean, that's your opinion. That's what you've heard. I don't agree with. Yeah. I can't help you if you want. I can't help you if you won't let me finish a sentence. Well, an answer involves me speaking a sentence. I was trying to respond to the lady in relation to skips. We don't have to provide skips. We've provided about 65 or 67 skips at our own cost. I don't think we'll get that money back from the government. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. In relation to the emergency phone line, I'm going to ask one of my colleagues who are sitting at the front to answer that question. We did provide a 24/7 overnight phone service from Boxing Day onwards, and that was staffed by people. I visited it a number of times. They weren't overwhelmed. There was enough people there to do the job. So there are a number of specific issues which we haven't got time to go into in detail tonight. But what we want... Yeah, well... yeah, no, I know it's not...
Excuse me.
Now, please,
I'll get back to the sandbags. Why did you close the yard at midnight on James Street and stop people getting sandbags?
Okay, that's a good question.
Steve.
Is there anyone here who
Steve
can answer that question?
Can answer a question about sandbags.
I'll give it again, but then can I have a turn?
Yeah.
Just hang.
Hello.
So the question is why sandbags were not available
Right.
after midnight.
A young lady, she was 20 weeks pregnant, delivering me sandbags at 1 o'clock in the morning. She couldn't go back and get them all because the council shut the yard.
Okay, that's the
I was
question.
the only person there putting sandbags out, none of the council.
And
If I can answer a few headline details about sandbags, I can't answer the specific that the gentleman's talking about. We will have to pick that up as a separate issue. But I can say that there's been a few comments since we've been here about what we did in sandbagging in our response during Boxing Day and the next couple of days. Can I please finish, madam? Our sandbag policy is that we deploy sandbags to all the strategic sites in York, so the flood defence locations on Clementhorpe and Tower Street and all these places. After that, we make sandbags available where possible to try to prevent further flooding to people property. We have a strategic supply of 2,000 sandbags filled at any time and many, many times more than that in empty sandbags. Over the course of our response, we deployed 13,000 sandbags across the city. On the first day, Boxing Day, we had 33 members of our frontline service available. That's from our waste, highways and public realm. And they sent sandbags to 88 different locations. Now, that's not just 88 requests for sandbags. Within those 88 locations, there were multiple requests for sandbags. On the second day, we had nearly 40 frontline staff available, and they deployed sandbags to over 240 separate locations. Again, multiple requests, multiple amounts of sandbags and deployment of sandbags. And then that continued into the third day. I haven't got the answers to that specific question, sir, but all I'm trying to say is whether or not the yard was perceived as closed by residents, but the figures I've given, sir, shows that we deployed 13,000 sandbags, 88 locations, first day, 240. We were out and about deploying sandbags wherever possible and in response to requests. So hopefully that's given you some information you need.
There you go. That's what you need to be reading.
Thank you.
Strategy plan for next time. 4 days I could have had it all done.
Thank you very much. Now, there's a lady at the back, I think, or man, there's somebody at the back who's been trying to get a question in for a long time. Would you like to have a go?
I'm going to do it because I've handed back twice already, Ron. One quick question for the Chief Executive, please. Was there, like for the Ouse, there's a City of York Council flood plan where they go and decide where it's already on, it's all written down, pumps, where to pump, sandbags and so on. Is there one for the Foss? Secondly, for the gentleman from the British Telecom, in my opinion, the British Telecom fail was nearly as bad as the Foss. I'd like to understand exactly what happened on Boxing Day with the British Telecom station, who was on duty, why the power was lost, what sandbag provision was made, what emergency situations were catered for, because it seems like it was dead as a dodo and nobody was around. Thank you.
Right, so the question is two questions. So the main one is about BT at the moment, I think. Chief Executive.
Sorry.
Was there a Foss plan?
I think all of the plans were based on the assumption that the barrier would work. Yeah. So that's something, and all of people's. It's on. Sorry, I'm not. And all of people's expectations were based on the barrier working, including everybody in the city, and that is something that will have to be reviewed going forward. Well, I'm not. I'm going to ask one of my colleagues down the front here. As you know, I didn't write the plan, but...
Is there anyone in the front from City Council who can say about the FOSS contingency plan?
Steve. For the emergency planning coordinator of the council, it is true to say that there is no specific plan for flooding on the FOSS. The reason being that we have for 30 years relied... For 30 years we've relied on the FOSS barrier, and for 30 years the FOSS barrier has worked. The further problem is if the barrier fails, the inundation is so rapid that there is very, very little the council can do in terms of putting in temporary defences.
Right, so the answer to the question is that there is not a contingency plan for the FOSS. Can we go to the second question that you raised about telephone systems going down? Can I pass that to the BT representative?
Okay, thanks. Our exchange flooded on the 27th. It was the first time the exchanges ever flooded. Yeah, sure. Can you hear me now? I'll try my accent as well. I do live in York. I live in Elwynton, but I've got a Scottish accent. But it was the first time it ever flooded. It wasn't seen as being on a floodplain, you know, and obviously we'll learn from that going forward. What happened was the power was cut. We did have backup power because we do have, contingency power, but the generators run out because, they're back up in batteries, obviously, because the power's gone, and they ran out. And the area was so flooded, it was very, very difficult to get in. We did have staff on. We have emergency procedures, not just for flood, but for these situations. And then we have a prioritisation, which is all about, life and limb services and some of the other things that were impacting. We pumped out 1.8 million litres of flood water, at the same time helped by some of the other agencies. We sandbagged to stop water coming back in because the surrounding area was still flooded. Our recovery was about 36 hours. Most of the services come back. We still have and have had some issues though where in other areas of the town, cabinets have been flooded, etc. And we've had to do a lot of work recabling. We'll look at where those cabinets are because again, they were in areas that they hadn't been flooded before. And where we have areas that do flood, we put our cabinets up or we put do something to stop it flooding. But where they haven't flooded before, we have those issues. And we have emergency response, procedures that kick in. We get our staff out. We've got 400 odd people living York. A lot of them seen what was happening and get involved early. They were contacting us. So a lot of our engineers were out. They were out here. They were out in Tadcaster because we had some challenges down there. And we tried to recover as quickly as we could. But prioritisation, I think, is the order for us. And as I say, we hadn't experienced it before. But we'll certainly, look at the equipment there. And you mentioned sandbagging, etc. We will look at it.
There's a person at the back who's been trying to speak.
Me and my partner both been growing up watching these police videos saying to lock up your possessions when you go away. Me and my partner went away this Christmas believing that our stuff would be okay in a cupboard, storage cupboard, downstairs because we live in a first floor flat. We got home we got told at 9 o'clock on Boxing Day that there was a flood in our area. We was helpless. We was stuck away. And there's nothing we could do. We come back the day after, having to pay £65 out to get back to York, to be told we couldn't return to our home because it had been flooded. Once we did finally get home, our storage cupboard had been totally devastated by water. All of our stuff, including quite a lot of summer clothes, had been lost. Yet the council are refusing to give us any help at all, so we are relying currently on the help by my support worker, by the people of York and surrounding areas and the rest of the UK for their donations, and I can't thank them enough. What are you going to do for people like us?
So you have not had any help, is that right?
We've only relied on the donations from the public, people who've come and helped us. We have tried to claim some money back from the council, but they say that because we live on a first floor flat, there's nothing they can do for us.
Because it's first floor flat.
All the council keeps saying at the moment is it should have had insurance. Too late to be saying should have had insurance. The insurance premium now in our area is £60. £60 a month we can't afford.
Okay, thank you. I don't know if there's anything else there.
If you want to come down here at the front at the end of the meeting, there are about 3 or 4 people who will help you and sort you out.
And there's a lady just 3 or 4 rows in front of you on the right-hand side there, please. In blue. The lady in blue has been trying to speak for a long time. And there's one there.
It's been reported in the media that the Environmental Agency raised the risk of the failure of the Foss barrier many years ago, over 10 years ago, and that's been brought to the City of York Council. So is this true? And if it is true, why haven't residents been made aware? Why hasn't the council got a plan if it has been highlighted as a major risk? And secondly, as a resident who has lost her home, hopefully the insurance company is saying maybe September you'll be home. So what is the risk to me now with this Foss barrier? You know, could it happen again? Could I move into my home all decorated in 9 months' time and then next Christmas face the same issues again? What are the risks and what are you going to do about, you know, this now?
Yeah. So it's all about the security of people who are behind the Foss barrier, who are worried that this may all happen again. What guarantees have they got that it won't? It's the Ouse as well, yes, sure. So is there an answer to that question? Anyone like to contribute?
Sorry, the question is what do you know? The question is what do you know for the last 10 years? That's the question.
Yes, you can.
I'm going to answer it. I worked for the council in 2000 and I was actually sent down to Silver Command to help coordinate all your equivalent people. At least twice, if not 3 times that night, your equivalents disappeared upstairs and talked about evacuating the whole of the city centre because they feared that the Foss barrier could fail and all this area could flood. That was 16 years ago. Why hasn't that been included in the plan in the council when you knew 16 years ago there was a possibility it could fail?
No, that's... But what you've said is certainly true. Yeah, that's a good question. And it's certainly true what you say about 2000, because I was here then. Yeah. Yeah. So, it's quite clear that you want answers to that question. Whether anyone is able to give you an answer is, I'm not clear.
Can anybody on the panel give us an answer to the lady's question? If you can't, please say no, we can't, and then at least we know where we stand.
I can only give you a partial answer. I mean, obviously, I wasn't here then. I think the council, in its role as the planning authority, was pointing that out to the Environment Agency. I think you've heard already that there is no contingency plan for the Foss barrier failing, and that's clearly an issue that will have to be gone into. But I think I'm right in saying, and there are 1 or 2 people in the room who could correct me if I'm wrong, that it was the council in its role as the planning authority that was pointing that out to the Environment Agency. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, Steve, just if I may, Steve's answer there was really answering that first question, which was about knowing for 10 years and the agency and the council knowing that potential failure. Steve's correct in what he's saying in that that was off the back of the Strategic Flood Risk Assessment, which is a planning document that all local authorities have to ensure that planning decisions are made with flood risk in mind. And it wasn't a warning that the barrier will fail. It was saying a worst case scenario for planning purposes. that were it to fail, this is how it should be incorporated into planning decisions. So that was the first question, and that's what's been covered in the media. As for the questions about what happened in Silver Command back in 2000, I personally can't give you the answer to that. I would need to look towards the EA for anything.
It's quite clear that that's a good question, and that people in the audience want to know the answer, but there may not be an answer that can be given tonight. Sorry? Well, it has to be answered, and surely part of the answer is that in the independent inquiry that's going to take place, we'll insist on that question being addressed. And as a result of this meeting, it will be passed into that inquiry, I assume. But there are several people who are trying to... over in the corner there.
Thank you. Just a quick question for the Environment Agency. Is there a distinction here between the Foss barrier failing and the Foss barrier not being fit for purpose for the amount of rain that fell? And understandably, rain has fallen more. We talked about the amount of rain that's fallen versus historical records. That's fine. How much money would it cost to increase the capacity of the barrier by 20, 30, 40, 50%? And will those funds be made available?
Can I now please,
yes,
at
please.
last, give a direct answer to
And I'm
that?
sorry it took till 20 to 8 to ask the...
Right. What I have to say is, and some of this may be uncomfortable, but we can never absolutely legislate for nature. That's the first point that I'll make. But what I will come on to and say this is, the pumps as they stand at this moment in time are now working again. They are now working again. They have been adequate for the last, more than adequate for the last 30 years. But I will come on. I will move this forward, I promise you. What we have at this moment in time then is the pumping station and the Foss barrier will continue to work as it has always worked previously. And as I have tried to indicate, it has served us well up until this point. This was an exceptional, a truly exceptional circumstance. Are we going to do anything about that? The answer is absolutely yes, we are. We were already in the process of spending something like £3 million to upgrade some of the aspects of the barrier because it is 30 years old, and it was part of our planned, if you like, improvement. But the government, in recognition of this event, I am really pleased and relieved to say, have given us a further £10 million to upgrade the Foss barrier, and that is what we intend to do. What I would say to you, again, is that 30 years, if we look back 30 years and we consider now what technology is capable of doing, I am hopeful that we will be able to increase the capacity of the Foss barrier. We're hopeful that that's what we'll be able to do, and to make it more resilient in terms of these issues that we've had with water ingress. Now, of course, I do go back to my earlier comment and say we still need to nail what the actual cause of that quick ingress was. I think that we also need to start thinking a bit more holistically. Yes, the barrier at this moment in time represents, in terms of York's overall defences, the only bit of those defences, if you like, that requires power. Everything else is passive. The walls are there. The gates can be shut. But the strategic flood risk assessment that was made is absolutely right. If the barrier fails, then the area behind it would flood. So we're going to increase the capacity of that, and we'll do it as quickly as we can. But what I would also say is I think there is genuinely, and this may not help for now, but there is genuinely a need for us to think about this in a much wider context. So, for example, what happens upstream of the Foss? Do we need to start thinking a bit more about how we manage the land, how we manage the entire catchment, so that we are not entirely dependent on the barrier? So, we've got 10 million quid and we will spend it.
Okay, thank you.
As fast.
How long do you think that will take? Sure.
Okay, timeline for this is as fast as possible. We have got people working on this now. I could sit here now and put a finger in the air and make some sort of guesses and all the rest of it. I give you a personal undertaking from both myself and the Environment Agency team and from the City of York working with us on this, that we will get this done as quickly as we can. You have my word as the area manager of Yorkshire on that.
We may have an indication as to when this will be achieved. Saying as quick as possible is good, but at least say in 3 months' time or 2 months' time, we will give you an indication of what our timeline is looking like.
Can you answer that question?
Right. I would hope to be able to do that within 1 or 2 months at the outside.
So people in
I am just, if you will forgive me here, I might be the area manager of Yorkshire, but in other respects as well, I do have to defer sometimes to my engineer. Am I okay to say that, Peter? In terms of the timeline, 2 months.
The public in York would like to know when they can expect the remedial works to be completed.
No.
And the suggestion is...
No.
Sorry, they would like to know when they can be told to repeat.
When we can tell you what the proposals will be. What do we think, Peter? Couple of months. Is that okay? Pardon?
So the 2 months is the figure that's been said. Now, there's somebody over here who's been trying to ask a question for a long time.
Chair, thank you. This meeting really has probably been misconceived because there are lots of questions being asked. People are not in a position to give definitive answers to everything, and there's a great deal of anger amongst the room, and that's why a lot of people are leaving. They're dissatisfied. May I suggest, Chair, I'm Jim Taylor, I'm a consulting engineer, that questions need to be asked, but there are allegations and counter-allegations going around and promises and half-promises being made. But really, we need to have the independent investigation first of all. We really need to have a technical audit and all the agency work coordinated through that process. It's only then that we will be able to answer, the panel and their advisors will be able to answer any of the questions with any confidence, because that will be facts-based. And you can only work on facts-based in a situation like this and lessons learned. All operations in life, in work, in business must be risk assessed. Control and mitigation measures must be in place. And there are big questions, obviously, that Mark has alluded to in relation to water and electrics, which must be answered. But we must have these questions answered after we know the facts. So I would respectively suggest, Chair, that this kind of meeting is best held after an inquiry has been convened and the results are known, published, and people can come and ask direct questions whereby the people who've actually been involved will have the definitive answers, and including, like the last question that was answered here, the timescale for actual actions that are going to protect us for the future. We have known that 28 years ago the barrier was going to give us some confidence on the FOST. We all had an early warning, effectively, in practice, on the 4th of November 2000, when we had unprecedented circumstances then. We all know also that conditions are getting worse with all the climate change implications, and we're in for worse conditions in the future. We must move fast and define what the problems are in all detail so that we can have answers for the future. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much indeed. I mean, I think it's fair to say that this is obviously a preliminary meeting. The public inquiry will begin in the near future, I think. And after that reports, then, of course, I suspect there I'm sure there will be subsequent meetings of this sort where people can question that report. There's a lady over here who's being anxious to contribute.
Thank you. I want to ask about the ooze. No disrespect to people on the Foss, but we don't have the benefit in my village in Naburn of the Foss barrier, and we flood regularly. I want to know the impact of the Foss barrier and the situation. Does that increase the flooding on the ooze when that is working and fully in force? And if you increase the defence there, what impact is it to us regularly flooding in villages on the ooze?
Thank you. The question, I think, did you get the question?
Yeah. I would hopefully give you the reassurance that even when the Foss barrier is working at full capacity, its impact on the mighty ooze is very, very limited, in fact, to the point of being negligible. If I could just give you some kind of feel for that. When the ooze is in full bore, so to speak, we are looking at something like 600 cubic metres a second going down that river. It is absolutely huge. So hopefully that will give you some reassurance. There's absolutely, when we think about flood risk, we genuinely do our best to make sure that when we improve flood risk in one place, we don't increase it in another. Now, again,
but we flood regularly, and so I think the people on the Foss would feel uncomfortable if, like in my village, we were under in 2000, under in 2012, under in 2015. It has been 3 times. We had no sandbags delivered, so we were already around 4 foot in water, and ones that did come actually were so poor quality they disintegrated, and we did feel out on a limb out in the village.
Thank you.
Okay.
Can I just say something on that? Naburn is the only place currently which has a pre-positioned stock of sandbags. Naburn is the only place currently which has pre-sited stocks of sandbags at the request of the parish council, and we sited 2,000 sandbags there some time ago, and told the parish council that it was for them to manage them. They also got 2 lorry loads of sandbags subsequent to the use of those.
The parish council said that they couldn't access the roads that cut off, and they were at risk flooding tide waves through other properties.
They couldn't access the stock that they had?
No, they couldn't access getting them to us who were near the dike, who go very quickly and were inaccessible.
Well, they usually come in off the A19, don't they, the lorries of sandbags?
No, but
I can't help you. The storage site was selected by the parish council, and that's where they were delivered to.
But even then they said they were adequate. There wasn't a sufficient number for the properties that flood.
Well,
so there are
they asked for
sandbags.
2,000, we gave them 2,000.
But there are sandbags, but there weren't enough of them. I think that's the part of the answer.
The parish council
there are
said
two
that they
people here
kept them from
who've been
2012 and they weren't allowed anymore. But I'll take that up with the parish council.
Can I suggest you talk afterwards about that in detail? Because I think there are 2 more questions here, and then I'm going to try and wrap up. There's another one there. 1, 2, 3. The gentleman in the grey coat.
Can I just go back to a bit earlier when people were saying that they weren't getting any warnings? I've owned the Mason's Arms on Fishergate for 20 years.
Are you Mr. Miller?
I am, yeah.
Oh, I was going to ask you. Carry on.
Obviously, as people were saying, there was no warnings given. And I was just asking, is Mr. Stewart, because we live next door to the Peas Home Centre, I was wondering if they got any warning, pre-warning of this. And if they did, a couple of days after the water receded, it seemed to me that the Peas Home Centre was up and running again without any at all.
Can you answer that,
Yeah,
sir?
Steve Waddington, I think.
Steve Waddington?
And if that's the case, are you just cherry-picking who you're telling?
So your pub was severely flooded, wasn't it? But your suggestion is
5 foot places, yeah.
And the building next door recovered faster.
It is owned.
And you also have an insurance problem.
Yeah. I'm looking at an insurance problem now, yes, because what my insurers haven't directly said to me, but what the feedback I'm getting is because the frost barrier was lifted, that doesn't constitute an act of God. It was done, I know you can laugh,
Yeah.
but it is quite serious to me, to be quite honest. We are well covered for the cover that we pay for. Now, if they refuse, because they're saying it was a deliberate act on the part of the Environment Agency, I will not be able to claim on my insurance. And I don't know if anybody else is in the same position, the pub is just about in the same state it was 3 weeks ago. Will we be able to claim off anybody, the government or the Environment Agency, because of this? Because we can't afford to get it done.
Thank you. Steve, do you want to?
Yeah, obviously I can't comment on insurance or anything like that. I'm Steve Waddington.
Insurance?
No, don't comment on this. I'm Steve
What
Waddington.
if we don't get paid?
I'm Steve Waddington. I'm the Assistant Director for
I know you
Housing
are,
and
Steve.
Community Safety.
We've had dealings before.
We have. The Peas Home Centre is owned by the authority. We got the same notice you got, as we said. We found out that the FOSS barrier had been lifted at 6 minutes past 7 when it had been lifted. We found out. Look, the question I was asked was about Peas Home. Peas Home was flooded. We didn't have any notice of that. We had to evacuate Peas Home in the same as other properties had to be evacuated. The design of that building is that the majority of the accommodation facility is above the flood line, but some of the building was flooded and all of the building was evacuated.
Okay, thank you. Lady in the black hat.
You were told at 6 minutes past 7 that the barrier was being raised. Yeah, but we've been in our house a year and a week. We were told we were protected by the barrier, so you weren't on the flood alert. Yes.
No, we can't really take this much further. You've made your point several times, and we do understand it, but we don't have an answer to you. We do not have an answer. It's quite clear. There is not an answer to that. But the lady with the hat.
David wants to talk about.
David.
Yeah,
David.
sorry. Could I just comment on the insurance issue in terms of the Masons Arms or any other insurance issues? In terms of the funding that's available, and we have tried to communicate this, and I suppose most of you are now aware. Businesses are entitled initially to the £2,500 clean-up grant, and we are trying to pay those to businesses as quickly as possible, and that's being done through Make It York. What I would say is that outside of that, if people are having their insurance turned down or large excesses and have issues around further additional funding that's required, you can still look at making a claim. The disaster fund that's been set up, although primarily it's been looking at residential issues, will also look at business issues. So I think you need to resolve the issue clearly with your insurer, but if you don't have insurance cover or they are refusing it, then you should come back to the council or to the disaster fund and we will look at it. Okay, and clearly there's been a few issues, I've seen a few people outside about funding issues. If people have been turned down for some reason, haven't received their £500, I'm quite happy to speak to them after this meeting. If they want to come and see me, we'll try and get it sorted out for you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Now, there are more hands going up. I'm going to have to stop in a minute. The chap there with who's been trying for some time, if you'd like to... In a minute, just a second, Gwen, just give us a chance. Other people have been trying to speak for a long time.
I'd like to direct my question at the... One at a time, please. I'd like to direct my question at the chap from the Council and the chap from the Environment Agency. Mr. Scott, you gave us a great speech about how good the barrier is. And for 30 years, it's been wonderful and it's protected the entire universe. 30 years ago, we had a boat on the Ouse and the Foss called the Reclaw, and it dredged. The Foss Basin, the city end of the Foss, is 6.5 metres full of silt. I checked that today. The water level is sitting at 7.5 metres. So you've got 1 metre of water and 6.5 metres of silt for the ducks to sit on. and that was at Layerthorpe Bridge. I walked all the way down towards the Red Castle. It's exactly the same down there. Sod the newts, dredge rivers, please. I'm really, it's time. If you consider the additional volume that the Foss could take, and this is without getting onto the Ouse, the Foss could take a monstrous volume of water which would reduce the flooding that we've experienced. It wouldn't get rid of it, but it would reduce it. If you look at the Ouse is, and I know this from a friend of mine who's a scuba diver, and they've been in at, not Lindell Bridge, the one south at Ouse Bridge, outside the King's Arms. The channel in the centre is about 3 metres deep. It used to be about 8. When I put this to an Environment Agency chap that came around to my shop a couple of days ago, he said, we can't dredge it because we're in fear of what would happen to the buildings that surround the Ouse. They may fall in, the ones that have been there for 500, 600, 700 years. That's a bit of a rubbish response. Personally, I'd like to see the Foss and the Ouse dredged. I'd like to see a dredge boat back on there in permanent use. The council, when did you sell the Reclaw? When did you sell the Reclaw, the dredger?
Reclaw was never a council asset. It was owned by J.H. Walkers, and the river was dredged for building sand, not for a navigation.
There's a hell of a lot of sand in there now, fella.
Okay, so thank you very much indeed. Now, there's somebody over, I can't, would you want to answer the question on dredging?
I'll keep hold of the microphone, so I'll keep attracting your attention.
Dredging does remain part of our armoury in terms of flood risk management. But in most circumstances, we do not believe that it is cost effective. We don't believe it to be cost effective in most circumstances. Where we think that it will reduce flood risk, we will still do this. But I think my advice is likely to be coming back around both the Foss and the Ouse, certainly, that unless we did some selective dredging in various areas to reduce flood risk, it's highly unlikely that I will be able to accede to your wishes, sir.
I think it's clear to see that the Ouse must be about half to a third of its possible volume due to the amount of silt that's in it. The Foss, God knows, I don't know how deep it is, but the measurements on Layerthorpe Bridge suggest there is 6.5 metres of silt.
Okay. No,
and can I just draw one little finishing point to what Mr. Scott said, and he inferred at holistic approaches to dealing with flooding. If you look at what happened, sorry, can you hear me? If you look at what happened at Pickering, and Pickering were quite picked up on by the news for saying that their methods of stopping the water in Dolby Forest and to the north worked. Brilliant, let's do it. Do it now. It's cheap. I mean, they stopped it for 2 million, I believe. They stopped their entire town flooding for 2 million quid, all by installing, I think, 180 mini dams and holding the water at source. That's a great idea. It doesn't mean putting great big blocks of concrete everywhere. But you've got a massive resource there, the Foss Basin, the Ouse, that can take a lot more liquid. And all you're doing is, oh, well, we don't think it's possible. I do not agree. Can we... Chair. Hello? Does anybody else actually agree that dredging...
So that's the sort of upstream result of...
Thank you. Right, that's it.
Okay, can I just come in on that? Because I've just got a very quick one. I do need to go. Yeah, a lot of people here who aren't insured, and it must be dreadful, and my heart really goes out to you. I am insured. I've never claimed on insurance ever, and I'm probably going to be looking at increased premiums for God knows how long. What am I supposed to do? My car, I could have moved it if you'd given me more warning. Sent those two, apparently the fire brigade had 2 boats that weren't used. I read in The Guardian that may not be true. If you give me one, I could have moved that. My insurance company, as far as they're concerned, it's my fault, and I'll be paying for that forever. I don't need your 500 quid. The council tax rebates is very nice, but actually we're talking about quite a big cost to hard-working people in York. What's got to be done about that?
I didn't hear that.
Well, it's probably not going to satisfy them. As you've said, everybody has got the £500 in the council tax and the business rate rebates, and that system will continue for as long as people are out of their properties. I think the issue that you've raised is technically, you know, we'd like to help you if we can, but we need to prioritise the money. And if you are insured, most of the government advice is try and deal with it through your insurance.
But the premiums will go up quite significantly. I bought my house in August. I did all my searches. That's my livelihood in that house. That is, you know, let's be honest, pensions aren't exactly going to be great when I retire. How am I going to sell that? Let's say I get a promotion. How am I going to sell that house and move to Sheffield, Leeds if I get promoted? It's not going to happen, is it? And my premiums are going to go up. And I've had that house since August. And I was told the barrier will protect that house. Like a lot of people on my road as well who've been there a year, etc., etc. So what's going to happen? The insurance companies will have a field day with the premiums, and I will have to pay them.
I mean, it's this issue about the barrier.
Final question before I ask our MPs if they would like to.
Thanks for the answers.
We have to be out of here at 8:15.
Well, I mean, I'm sorry that I can only answer the question in relation to the council. The gentleman is making a point about the failure of the barrier, which is, you know, Mark's spoken a lot about this evening.
I understand decisions had to be made, and there was the worry that the pumps were going to fail and the barrier had to be lifted. But what can you do to persuade me that the right decision was made, given the size of the Ouse and the size of the foss? When the foss barrier was lifted, what direction was the water going in?
This is for you. We couldn't hear that, I'm afraid. I'm sorry.
What direction was the water going in when the foss barrier was lifted? Defend the decision to lift the foss barrier. The Ouse is a huge body of water, the foss isn't.
Yep, okay. When the barrier was lifted...
Because I know which direction it was going outside my house. I was holed up in there for 3 days with no communication and nothing to tell me what was going on at all apart from Radio York.
Right, okay. When the barrier was lifted for a very, very short period of time, just before the barrier was lifted, there was an increase in the level in the foss. But pretty much by the time the barrier was fully lifted, both the foss and the Ouse were basically reconnected. So now what's going to happen in those circumstances is that the foss is now going to track the curve of the Ouse. So it is highly likely, well, it's not highly likely, so what happened at that point, the Ouse was still rising. So what would have happened is that the Ouse would have inundated, would have moved up the foss, so it would have pushed water back up the foss.
So the decision was made...
Does that answer your question, sir?
Sort of. So the decision had been made that it would have been worse if the foss barrier had been left down. The foss would have done more damage than the Ouse.
Yes, absolutely. I am confident of that.
Right, well now, we've got to finish now, I'm afraid, but although some of the people here might want to continue discussion outside, we've got our two MPs here, and I wonder if they would like to say a couple of words towards the end of this meeting, please. Rachel, would you like to say something? Quite briefly.
Ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I want to say, obviously, if you have been flooded in any means whatsoever, as your MP for York Central, and I know the same will be for Julian in York Outer, we're here to help and support you, and very much been trying to do that over the last few days. Obviously, I can't reverse what happened, but I am asking questions, and as a result of that, I've held a number of community meetings so far. I've got another one in for the Clement Thorpe area tomorrow morning at 9:30 at Southlands Church, 2 in the city centre next weekend at West Offices on the Friday at 6:30, and the Early Music Centre on Saturday, the 23rd of January at 10 a.m, and also one in Clifton at 6:30 on the 29th at the Methodist Church, and then for the Lehman Road area at St Barnabas Church at 5 o'clock on the 29th. And if you're from anywhere in the city, please come along to that. I'm gathering information and I'm getting answers out of agencies. Today I held a meeting for businesses across the city, and we had the Association of British Insurers up for that, as well as organisations, business organisations from across York. And there is a stream of work I'm doing around businesses if that's the situation you're in. What I would say to anybody is please contact me if you have got any issues around your clear-up, around your insurance or anything else, and then we'll pursue that. There are a number of ways that as MPs we can get information, and also meeting with ministers and getting answers out of ministers to try and address issues, because I'm very aware from knocking on doors right across the city and being out and talking with so many of you that there are some real issues. Some people have lost everything bar the clothes they stand up in. And I want to, at this point, thank the city for the tremendous support that it's given through the volunteers and people just giving donations. It has been absolutely tremendous. But the reality, it's going to take a long time to put lives back together again. And therefore, it's really vital that we pull together to do that. So I'm here to help. And really, that's my message. And that's what I've been doing, trying to get answers. I have got some answers, but I will continue to do that. So please contact me on rachel.maskell.mp@parliament.uk.
Thanks very much.
Thank you, Rachel. Can I, Julian Sturdy, Julian Sturdy, MP for York Outer. Can I just echo what Rachel has said? I mean, it's horrific what has happened to the city and people who have been flooded, but as local MPs, we are here to help. If you are a constituent of mine, if you're having problems with the insurance company, if you're having problems with the clean-up, please contact me. Please come and see me after this meeting. I'll be here for time after the meeting to answer questions and try and help, because we are there to help you. We really do need to get to the bottom of and answer the questions. A few points I would just like to make was, I think the gentleman who spoke over at the corner there, when he said we need to have the technical audit and inquiry and then have a meeting like this to really come back and answer the questions, I think is so important. There's a lot of questions that have been asked tonight, a lot of really important questions that haven't been answered. And there's a number of reasons why they can't be answered, but we need to get to the bottom. I really want to know, with the Environment Agency, how this money is going to be spent on the Foss Barrier. Exactly, we need to know the details of how that is going to be spent, what work is going to be carried out. I would really like to see from BT a plan coming forward about what you're going to do to make your area more resilient to future events like this, because obviously that was a huge impact right across the city, and the loss of the communications had a huge impact on how the emergency services were able to respond as well. So I think that's really important we get those answers to those questions. But please, we're here to help, both as MPs and the council and your local councillors. There's many local councillors in the room tonight. Please contact us if you are having issues with insurance companies, not wanting to pay up. If you're having problems with the clean-up, please contact us. We will react and we will help with that information. Many questions I know you'll have, and we've got to get to the bottom of it. And it is going to take time, but I think there is the will there to really to answer those questions and make sure we don't have an event like this happening again.
Thank you very much. Now, just to conclude, a few words about what happens next. And perhaps I could ask Chris Stewart to say a word or two about the public inquiry and how you can contribute to it, if you wish.
Okay, yeah, thanks very much. And thanks everyone that again has come along tonight, and everything that people have done for the city over the last couple of weeks. I just, first of all, stress it's really important that people do get all the help they're due. And obviously we've been trying to put out the various messages about things like the financial assistance, the help with getting advice on insurance, and obviously you've heard the MPs that they can help. But I want to make 2 points about moving forward, okay? The first one is we know for a fact that there's still going to be people 6 months plus who won't be in their home for, and that's absolutely awful. It's a nightmare for them. So we're doing stuff practically on the council tax relief and all those sort of things. But it's still going to be absolutely hellish for those people who've seen their life, washed away. But we as a city have got to move forward, and we've got to go forward positively. And I have spoken to some people who've seen their homes flooded and also their businesses flooded. And there's a really practical point that whilst we do all the stuff we can to help, if you're a business, for example, on Fossgate, and we're seeing these images put out on the national media of York underwater and everything like that, it's really, really difficult. So one of the people here tonight is Steve Brown, who's from Make It York, and he's obviously one of the leads on us working together for businesses, because the absolute nightmare would be somebody loses their home due to the flooding and then they lose their job. Now, that's not something we can influence massively from this room today. It's something that we as politicians have got to get the message out with the media, about York is absolutely open. Everybody should come to York. It's not saying people haven't been affected, they have been and they will be, but we've got to get people back into York. And the second point is about the inquiry, and I do think it's been a positive thing to have this meeting here tonight because people obviously are frustrated. You've heard some questions answered, and as Julian said, some questions that can't be answered tonight. I'll remain here tonight for as long as it takes, and equally, people can feed in their questions to us by email, phone, or happy to meet up. And then we want to have a full inquiry into this. Now, in terms of timescale, I would say that months is the timescale. It's not going to be days and weeks. It's not going to be instant. It's going to be over months. But that's going to be as independent as it possibly can be. So we've had the council's legal officer working on terms of reference for that inquiry. All the comments tonight are noted. They'll be fed in. There's many suggestions already being made that are sensible. But in terms of the inquiry, we're going to appoint a chair to that inquiry who will be independent. And then we're going to have a panel. And this is a process that will be approved by all the leaders of all the political groups in York. And we're already in discussions, and the next discussions about it will be Wednesday. And that will be something that, people can feed in wherever they are, so we really can learn the lessons. And obviously, I'm not going to say so this never happens again, because unfortunately, we as a city are used to flooding, and it's a great shame that we are, but so that we can be as well prepared as we possibly can be, so we can take on board all the comments that have been made and ideas going forward.
Thank you very much. And finally, Keith Aspden, I think, Keith, you'd like to say a few words about what happens locally.
Thank you. Yeah, just very quickly, again, to echo the last comments, just to thank people for coming. Two things. We really started this evening saying there are clearly going to be an awful lot of lessons to learn from the flooding. I think we've got some lessons to learn about the format and structure of the public meeting as well. But perhaps I shouldn't say that. I hope that the inquiry with the independent chair will actually be able to go through in more detail and then come back to this style of meeting to complete and answer some of those questions that people have got. From my perspective, I think what is absolutely clear is that there are an awful lot of genuine questions about the speed of response, the availability of information and communication when people needed it. I know from my community that sort of panic the day after Boxing Day when the telecommunications went down, people did not know what was happening, and I'm sure everybody can understand that and use that for improving it in the future. They're the MP's surgery meetings coming up, but City of York Council are also going to be doing some extra ward meetings. These ward meetings will be in the communities that were most affected. So they'll be advertised through your local councillors and also on the City of York Council website. So specific questions in particular neighbourhoods with City of York Council and the Environment Agency will give another opportunity to ask those questions. And again, like the others, I'll be around at the end if anybody has any others for me. Thank you.
Well, that's a good point. How can that best be done? How can these meetings best be advertised other than through?
Yes, absolutely. One of the problems, obviously, is too much reliance on social media and just websites, and obviously people that don't have access to that. I hope that local councillors, parish councils, where you've got them, will be able to advertise them in newsletters, but also people like Minster, Radio York, just to get the message out there for the dates and when people can go to them is important as well.
Okay, well, thank you very much indeed. It just remains me to say thank you to the Council for arranging this meeting, to the panel and everybody else who's contributed, to everybody for coming, and to apologise for your chairman. So I hope you've got something out of it, and this is only the first step to what has to be done in the city to make sure that this catastrophe doesn't happen again. Thank you very much.